Hello, people of the internet. I am back, and in this video, I'm talking about the differences between the Broadway musical version of Beetlejuice and the film version of Beetlejuice directed by Tim Burton. Now, the musical is very different to the movie, and it knows this. One of Beetlejuice's first lines is how different the musical is. Basically, his line is, "Wow, a ballad already, and such a bold departure from the original source material." Yes, they know what's going on. They know it's different, but it still manages to be good. Unless you're, I don't know, a film purist, then maybe you won't like it. But it it has gathered a lot of fans. So Beetlejuice, we can start with the title character. Um, Beetlejuice, first off, physical differences. He has very short hair, like spiked up, and he's not got like green all around his face and like sunken eyes. He's just kind of a pale dude, some green on his face because he's been buried for who knows how long, and he, same as the average Beetlejuice, he doesn't wear the suit throughout the entire movie or the entire thing. He a lot of the time is dressed in like a hobo suit. He looks homeless or like he's been dead for quite a few years. Well, the movie says he survived through the Black Plague, so that's kind of a clue to how old he is, but I don't know, at least, for sure. But yeah, that's his physical appearance. He's also more goofy in the musical. Like, he's not outright just a sucky person. He's just, a jokester that doesn't know when to stop his jokes, essentially. He thinks jokes all the time is fine, and that kind of gets on people's nerves. Also, speaking of his jokes, he in the movie he likes to make sexual advances, or call it like it is, sexual harassment. He sexually harasses Barbara all the time, and he still does that in the movie or in the musical, but he also likes to sexually harass Adam too. So, bye King. We love that for him. Yeah, so that's kind of different. Also, his thing with Lydia. In the movie, they kind of touch on it, but in the musical, they expand on it. How he isn't actually marrying Lydia for marriage, because legality, that's very bad, and he knows it. In the musical, they even talk about, or one of the lines is, "I can't believe some cultures think this kind of thing's all right." So yeah, they know it's bad. In the musical, they like to touch on it more, how he says all the time it's a green card thing. He marries so he can stay alive. He says that in the music or in the movie, but he's it's like touched on once, and he seems a bit eager about marriage, which, yeah, he's dead, but he wants to be living again. Anyways, and the way he dies, they use a loophole in that, in the musical versus the movie, or in both versions. So once he is legally married, so when the man says, "I now pronounce you man and wife," he is legally married, so he is living. And in the musical, they expand on how living he is, with the actor Alex Brightman, who is a very good Beetlejuice, and then Michael Keaton in the movie. But yeah, they expand on how all of the perks of living come back to him, And then in the musical, Lydia stabs him with a giant thing, and he's recently deceased. And in the movie or musical, they add a new rule where once you are dead, you have to proceed directly to the afterlife. That's not a thing in the movie. In the movie, he's well, it's just that you get 100 years to settle your affairs, but you get a couple meetings with the person, and that's why you find him at the end of the movie. In the movie, he dies by getting eaten by a sandworm, which they nod to earlier in the movie a lot, where he sees a newspaper article that says something about sandworms, and also he says, "I hate sandworms." So, hinting to his death. But since he is recently deceased, he goes to the netherworld to talk with Juno. Juno is also different in the movie. Juno and BeetleJuice were business partners, but in the musical, it's more than that. Juno was his mother, which kind of a funny change, but that's about it with Juno. Anything else with BeetleJuice? Not really much. He's more of a goofball in the musical. I mentioned that, didn't I? He's goofball, just plays around all the time, doesn't really know when to stop playing. In the movie, he's explicitly just a crappy person. So that's about where BeetleJuice ends. We can next move on to Lydia. Lydia is not too different. In the movie, she's just kind of this depressed being, doesn't show a lot of emotion until unless she's scared or she gets excited about strange, dark, and unusual things. She gets excited about the idea of ghosts communicating with her. And then at the end of the movie, you can tell she's a bit more happy. She still likes the dark aesthetic, but she's more happy with her situation. And also, on the subject of Lydia, her mother is actually a bigger part of the movie. They never really bring up her mother unless, when the first time she says it, when she says that Delia's her stepmother, her mother died. That's the only time they bring it up. But in the movie, the musical, that's her whole motivation, her mother being dead, and Delia not being a replacement. Though in the musical, Delia and Charles aren't really married, or at least not married until the end. Or even after. But yeah, her mother actually gets a name in this. Her mother is Emily Dietz, and she talks about how that's her whole thing. The grown-ups around her try to just get her to be happy, be normal, even though she did like the aesthetic before her mother died. Her mother and her were both fans of the aesthetic. Sounds outside. I'm like a dog, just hear a sound or see a thing, look over. Anyways, so her mother has more importance. But yeah, and then from there, I guess we can move on to Charles. Charles is, I don't know in the musical why he goes out to the countryside, but his character is very different. In the movie, he's kind of, he's rich. I mean, I think he was rich in the movie too, but in the musical, he's just like this fancy man. He's like, Delia and I were talking about, on behalf of Delia and myself. So that's kind of him, and I assume he moved out because the nervous breakdowns, but he wanted to make the town a gated community as opposed to this tourist trap. So that's kind of where he's where he is. In the musical, they joke about him changing too, but not in the way that I'm talking about. It's not something I'm gonna get into, but yeah. And then his love, Delia. Delia in the movie is like this artsy, like she's artsy. In the musical, she's like, I guess the best term I can think of is hippie. I don't know. She talks about like the universe has a reason for everything, like crystals. I think she got scammed. Apparently her crystals tell her to buy more crystals, which is might be something that like the seller, there's hair everywhere, the seller did, like, hey, you should buy more crystals, you know. But she also has more layers to her. She talks about how her boyfriend, or her husband, left her for another man, and she's kind of this tragic character, and that's kind of why she acts how she acts. But she's not a jerk in this. She just, peppy and never be sad, always show happiness, which isn't, that's called repression. That is not good. But yeah, Delia is very interesting in the musical. And then the only other characters that are really worth mentioning are the Maitlands, Barbara and Adam. They are very different in the movie, or in the musical. I don't know how to describe them, but they are like this ideal couple, essentially. They are like, Adam is into restoration and like perfectionist kind of, and Barbara likes pottery, and they're like this very suburban family. BeetleJuice describes them as, and I don't know if there's any symbolism in it, but their clothes change too. Like, Adam is usually wearing that plaid, shirt, button up with the red shirt underneath, and Barbara's wearing like the pink dress. But in the musical, they're both wearing green. Like, Adam wears green stripe or green plaid or something, and it's like short sleeve as opposed to the long sleeve he wears in the movie. And then Barbara wears a green dress instead. And their death is also different. They, of course, a car crash, especially the way they died in a car crash, would be very hard to do on stage. So they joke about, and also, before I get into that, they're kind of debating with themselves whether or not to have a child. They make excuses, justifying why they don't want to have a kid with, oh, there's all these problems in our house and with the rest of the world that we don't want to have a kid in, so why have a kid? And that's different from the movie, where the movie had they couldn't have a kid due to medical reasons. So that's different, and it fits in with the theme. If you're waiting for all this stuff to be fixed before you let life happen, then your life is going to pass you by, and you're going to die before before you do anything with your lives. And that's kind of like the theme of the movie. Live your life to the fullest, because death is not great, and you can never know what's beyond. So try to live your life the best you can before that happens. And the Maitlands kind of encapsulate that. They're very symbolic in the musical, or more obviously symbolic. And they die before even having a kid. They break through. Adam brings up, we can't have a kid in a house with creaky floorboards, and then those floorboards break underneath them and they die. And BeetleJuice is like, yep, this is a show about death, I told you. But yeah, they're interesting characters. It's interesting how they changed, and it's interesting, like, they're very interesting. And it's cool to see. I like the musical a lot. And what's some other things I can talk about? Maitlands? Anything to talk about with the Maitlands? Yeah, later into the musical, when they're dead, they're like, we did all this stuff in life that we just weren't enjoying, but we wanted to be this idealistic family, or this idealistic couple. I don't know if they could call themselves a family since no child, but they were a family. They wanted to be this like idealistic version of themselves, and like they weren't happy with it, and they only realized that after they died, and they realized, okay, now we're here, we have to be there for Lydia. Lydia needs parental units that give her attention. And by the end, Lydia has that. She has Delia, Charles, and the Maitlands, and they're like, they treat her the way she was hoping to be treated. She wanted attention, and I don't know. I think that's, yeah, so they're like, we need to be here for Delia, or for Lydia, and Charles. Delia, or I'm getting so confused. Lydia, throughout the musical, is like, adults are never there for me. She says, grown-ups want to fix things when they can't. It only fills them with shame, so they just walk away, or look away. But yeah, she feels like her dad doesn't know how to help her, so he just ignores the problem, and she thinks he's just forgotten about Emily, but he actually is doing this because he thinks it would be best for Lydia. And it's, I realize I haven't talked about how the movie is much in this, but yeah, that's about what I have to say. So tune in next time whenever I upload again, and yeah.